world screams, everyone talks endlessly, louder, faster, constantly, and if you're not loud enough, you vanish. But what if not speaking isn't weakness? What if silence is actually the deepest form of presence? You've been trained to fill every second, to answer instantly, to post, to reply, to explain, as if your existence depends on being seen, being heard. But they never told you this. Silence unsettles people. It forces them to hear their own noise. It makes them wonder what you're thinking. It creates tension, and tension is power, because silence is not absence. It's pressure, it's restraint, it's choosing not to burn your energy on things that don't matter. What would your life look like if you stopped being so available? Not just physically, emotionally, mentally. What would change if you stopped giving instant reactions, endless explanations, cheap apologies? This is about more than just being quiet. It's about becoming deliberate, about letting your silence mean something. And today we explore that idea through two masters of the mind, two men who didn't just talk about silence, they lived it. Epictetus, Schopenhauer. Epictetus didn't grow up in a palace. He was born a slave, owned, controlled, ordered. And yet, he became one of the wisest men in history. Why? Because he realized one thing. You can't control the world, but you can control how you respond to it. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." He believed that silence is more than stillness. It's strength. It's restraint when your ego demands attention. It's the power to observe rather than react. In a world that's reactive, silence is revolutionary. Most people talk to avoid discomfort. They argue to defend what they don't even understand. They speak to feel like they matter. But Epictetus taught that silence is where clarity lives. When you don't speak, you're not retreating. You're sharpening. You're choosing awareness over impulse, patience over pride. Because not every reaction deserves your energy. Not every comment deserves your truth. And the more silent you become, the more you start to hear yourself. Silence then becomes not just a tool, but a weapon, a shield, and most of all, a choice. Schopenhauer didn't believe in people. He believed in solitude, not because he hated others, but because he knew most noise is just distraction. To him, silence wasn't an absence. It was space, a sacred distance from shallow minds and louder egos. He once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." In other words, those who talk too much usually don't think much, because thinking is uncomfortable, and silence makes you confront yourself. Most people aren't ready for that. That's why they fill every second with noise, with attention, with dopamine. But Schopenhauer found clarity in the void, in walking alone, in observing rather than participating. He believed that silence is where your true thoughts show up, not the ones you borrow from others, but the ones that come when there's no one to impress. And he warned, the more you grow, the quieter you'll become, not because you're weak, but because you've seen enough to know. Not everyone deserves to hear your truth. In silence, there is sadness, but also sovereignty. You don't just run out of time, you run out of energy. Not physical, mental, emotional, psychic energy. It's the fuel for your focus, your willpower, your clarity. And every time you get dragged into noise, you leak it, arguing with someone who doesn't want to understand, explaining yourself to someone who's already judged you, overthinking a reply you didn't even need to send. You're not tired because you did too much. You're tired because you gave too much to the wrong things. That's where silence becomes essential. It's not avoidance, it's a filter. Silence filters out the pointless, the drama, the emotional traps. It stops you from leaking psychic energy through 1,000 cracks. When you choose silence, you're not being passive. You're being precise. You're saying, I choose not to spend my peace on this. And that choice, that quiet refusal, builds something inside you. Discipline, focus, space to think again. Because when you stop leaking, you start building. And that's the kind of silence that doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. Not everyone can handle your silence, because silence doesn't explain itself, it doesn't reassure, it doesn't bend, and that makes people uncomfortable. Why? Because silence reflects them back to themselves. And most people don't like what they see. They project, they assume, they invent meanings that were never there, just to fill the void. Your silence becomes a mirror, and the louder their reaction, the deeper their fear. Some people will call you arrogant, cold, detached, not because you are, but because they can't access you. Silence, when used with intention, becomes a wall they can't climb. And that wall, it's not made of pride. It's made of clarity. You know who you are. You don't need to defend it. The irony, the less you explain yourself, the more they wonder about you. Because the world is used to noise, it fears what it can't read, and nothing is harder to read than a person who speaks less, but sees more. Silence is not emptiness. It's space. It's breath. It's control. In a world addicted to noise, the one who listens holds the rarest power, because silence isn't passive. It's intentional. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your energy, your time, your self-respect. You realize not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every insult deserves a reply, and not every question is worth answering. Silence isn't about hiding, it's about choosing, and sometimes it's the loudest thing in the room. The quietest people often carry the deepest storms. They've seen too much, felt too deeply, and learned the hard way that noise doesn't solve much. You may lose people when you go quiet. People who needed your energy, not your presence. People who only understood your noise, never your soul. But what you gain is clarity, peace, freedom. So ask yourself, can you be okay with not being understood, if it means understanding yourself? Can you sit with your silence and hear what the world has tried to drown? If yes, then you're no longer reacting, you're becoming. If you made it this far, comment below, I choose silence. Let the noise talk. We listen.